Friends, the most dangerous moment in a life is not when the world says no. To you it is when you finally say yes to your own soul. We spend years polishing a mask for the marketplace. It smiles, it agrees, it fits. Yet every night the unlived life knocks on the window of the heart. The day you choose yourself, the mask loosens. At first there is a chill. You fear you'll be exiled by the tribe. But exiles discover fire. In that fire you meet the figure you've avoided, the shadow, the parts of you that carried your anger, your appetite, your creativity, your courage. You thought they were enemies, they were guardians waiting to be consulted. The mask we wear is not a lie, at least not in the ordinary sense. It is a necessity. Without it we could not meet the demands of society, nor could we find a place in the intricate web of human relations. It gives us a name, a face, a function, and allows us to participate in the common world. Yet what begins as a useful garment soon grows into a prison. The longer it is worn, the more it tightens, until the skin beneath forgets its own texture. One begins to believe the mask is the face, and in doing so the breath of the soul becomes shallow. But there comes a moment, perhaps in the silence of the night, perhaps in the collapse of an old certainty, when the mask slips. It may not fall away in a grand act of rebellion. Often it loosens quietly. The words of agreement suddenly taste of ash. The laughter given on command feels brittle in the mouth. A fatigue creeps in, not of the body but of the spirit, as though one has grown tired of playing a role in a play that no longer deserves to be staged. The slipping of the mask is rarely comfortable. It exposes raw skin to the wind. For years, perhaps decades, that mask has mediated between you and the world. Without it, the air feels too sharp, too cold. Yet it is only in this moment of nakedness that the authentic psyche first draws breath. The psyche does not demand perfection, it demands reality. Behind the mask lives the reservoir of unlived life, impulses denied, truths silenced, passions postponed. They wait like forgotten children in the basement of the house, restless, calling, sometimes banging on the pipes so loudly that symptoms appear: anxiety, irritability, exhaustion. We mistake these knocks for flaws to be eradicated, when in truth they are signals, attempts of the deeper self to be noticed. As long as the mask is pressed firmly in place, their voices remain muffled. When it loosens, they rush to the surface, sometimes in unruly and unsettling ways. To drop the mask is not to discard society altogether. One cannot live without some adaptation to the expectations of others. But there is a difference between wearing a mask as a tool and confusing the tool for the self. The tragedy lies in becoming fused with the role, doctor, teacher, parent, leader, until the living individual is sacrificed to the idol of a persona. The authentic psyche does not ask you to abandon these roles, but to stand behind them as their master rather than their slave. When the mask loosens, the shadow steps forward. It is the collection of all that the mask excluded: the anger, the desire, the creativity, the tenderness that did not fit the polished face shown to the world. At first, meeting the shadow is like encountering a stranger with your features. Yet in its dark eyes there is vitality. The authentic psyche does not breathe in purity, it breathes in wholeness. The shadow, once acknowledged, returns to you the oxygen of strength you had disowned. There is danger in mistaking the collapse of the mask for liberation alone. It is liberation, but it is also burden. One must now face the task of carrying the fullness of oneself without hiding behind a single flattering image. This is the beginning of an inner dialogue that may last a lifetime. The psyche, given room to breathe, reveals itself in dreams, in sudden intuitions, in strange coincidences that arrange themselves like a pattern just beyond rational grasp. To live from this place requires courage, for the world may not always applaud, but applause is a poor substitute for authenticity. The one who drops the mask does not become isolated. Paradoxically, he or she becomes more capable of genuine relationship. For no true intimacy is possible when only masks are conversing. It is only when the authentic psyche breathes that another soul can recognize it and respond. This recognition is what we call love, friendship, community. It is not the meeting of two masks, but of two living centers. There is grief, of course, in loosening the mask. One grieves the years spent suffocating behind it, the friendships or careers that existed only because of its surface. Yet grief is the shadow side of awakening, the price one pays for returning to life. And on the other side of grief lies freedom, the freedom of breath, the freedom of being claimed by no role, the freedom of saying, "This is who I am, even if it does not please every eye that looks upon me." To let the mask slip is not to abandon the world, but to enter it more deeply. A mask can smile, but it cannot feel. A mask can speak, but it cannot mean. Only the authentic psyche, breathing fully, can turn existence into a life that is lived from its roots. And in that breath the individual finds not only himself, but the world finds him as well, for the world too longs for truth over performance. When we look upon another, we rarely see them as they are. Instead, we cast upon them the colors of our own hidden life. We lend them our longings, our fears, our wounds, and our secret strengths. This is projection, the act of placing upon another person what is, in truth, our own unseen material. It is as though the psyche, unwilling to bear its fullness, breaks off fragments of itself and paints them onto the canvas of the world. For a time, it relieves us of the burden of self-confrontation. But it also blinds us, for we begin to live among shadows we ourselves have thrown and mistake them for reality. At first, projection can feel intoxicating. We fall in love not with the person before us, but with the image we have cloaked them in. They seem radiant, almost divine, because they are carrying our unlived divinity, or we fall into hatred, despising in them qualities that secretly belong to our own disowned shadow. The person becomes a screen for our inner theater, and every gesture they make seems to confirm the script we ourselves have written. Yet sooner or later reality asserts itself, the beloved proves human, the enemy shows unexpected tenderness, and the neat categories collapse. In these moments of disillusionment, we have a choice. We can either move from one projection to another, endlessly repeating the cycle, or we can withdraw the colors we have splashed upon others and claim them as our own. Withdrawing projections is no easy task. It requires us to admit that what we admire or despise most intensely in others belongs, in some measure, to ourselves. The one whose brilliance dazzles us carries the seed of our own unexpressed potential. The one whose arrogance enrages us mirrors our own hidden hunger for power. Even the figures of myth and story, who seem to stand above the human, are containers for archetypal patterns within us. When we take back these projections, we are confronted with the vastness of our own inner world, a world both more glorious and more unsettling than we had dared imagine. The process often begins with disappointment. A friend betrays us, a lover falls from the pedestal, a leader proves corrupt. In the pain of disillusionment, we are tempted to curse them, to brand them false, but a deeper voice whispers, what was it in you that needed them to be flawless, larger than life, or monstrously evil? What need compelled you to hand over so much psychic energy to another? This question, though uncomfortable, is the beginning of integration, for when the projection is withdrawn, the energy returns home. That energy, once locked outside in another figure, becomes available to animate our own life. Consider the one who always irritates you with their arrogance. Perhaps beneath your irritation lies a part of yourself that has been too timid, too accommodating, too fearful of claiming space. Their exaggerated dominance is your disowned assertiveness, magnified and distorted. If you can see this, and if you can withdraw that projection, you may reclaim the right to speak with authority, to say no, to exist fully. Likewise, the one you idolize, whose creativity leaves you breathless, is carrying your own unborn creative fire. To withdraw the projection is not to cease admiring them, but to recognize that their light points toward a flame already smoldering within you. As long as we leave our projections unexamined, we remain enslaved by them. We are tossed between idealization and contempt, seduction and disappointment, without ever encountering reality, neither the reality of the other person nor our own. But when we gather these scattered fragments back into ourselves, we begin to see others more clearly. They are no longer gods or demons, but human beings with their own struggles, their own journeys. True relationship becomes possible only when projections are withdrawn, for only then do two individuals meet, rather than two mirages. This withdrawal does not happen once and for all. It is a lifelong labor, for the psyche is always tempted to project its unacknowledged material onto the nearest surface. But each time we notice it, each time we gather back the colors, we grow more whole. The world, too, becomes richer, for it is no longer distorted by our fantasies, but encountered in its living truth. And paradoxically, by recognizing our projections, we also come closer to the divine. For the divine is not outside, imprisoned in another person's form, but woven through our own depths, waiting to be discovered not in the idolization of another, but in the integration of ourselves. To withdraw the projections, then, is to call back the exiled parts of the soul. It is to reclaim the scattered pieces of our own being and to walk with them consciously. Only then can we look into the eyes of another and see not the screen of our own longing or fear, but the mystery of a fellow traveler. And only then do we begin to live not among shadows, but among realities. There is within each of us a figure we try not to meet. It waits in the margins, carrying all that we have exiled from the story of who we believe ourselves to be. We call ourselves kind and repress our cruelty. We prize discipline and banish our hunger for abandon. We shape a public face to be loved, and everything that does not fit that image is cast into the cellar of the psyche. This hidden figure is the shadow. It is not evil by nature, though it may appear monstrous when ignored. It is simply the sum of our disowned traits, those qualities, impulses, and energies that consciousness refused to welcome. Most people fear the shadow, and with good reason. To acknowledge it means admitting that we are not as purely virtuous, controlled, or admirable as we would like to appear. It means facing jealousy, rage, lust, cowardice, greed, all the qualities we condemn in others and secretly deny in ourselves. But the shadow is not only composed of what is dark. It also contains what is bright but rejected, creativity suppressed because it felt unsafe, power muted to avoid conflict, joy stifled because it seemed foolish. When you lock the cellar door, you trap not only your demons but your angels. Befriending the shadow is not the same as indulging it. It is not a call to act out every impulse or justify every destructive tendency. To befriend is to recognize, to dialogue, to integrate. The shadow does not want control, it wants acknowledgement. It wants to be seen as part of the whole, rather than cast out as an enemy. When you turn toward it with honesty, you discover that what once terrified you becomes a source of vitality. The anger that threatened to erupt becomes the fire to defend what matters. The envy that ate at your heart becomes the recognition of desires you have yet to pursue. The sadness you hid from others becomes the depth through which you can finally feel compassion. The greatest danger lies not in the shadow itself, but in ignoring it. What is denied does not disappear, it returns in disguise. The man who disowns his aggression becomes passive, aggressive, sabotaging rather than confronting. The woman who denies her desire for freedom becomes resentful of those who live it openly. The leader who insists upon his moral perfection is undone by secret corruption. The more fiercely you resist the shadow, the more power it gains over you. It is like a figure following close behind. When you run, it grows larger. When you turn to face it, it shrinks to human size. To befriend the shadow requires courage, but also humility. One begins by asking, what traits in others evoke the strongest reactions in me? Whom do I despise? Whom do I idealize? What irritates me disproportionately or fascinates me beyond reason? These are clues, for often what stirs us most in others belongs also to us, but in a form we do not wish to own. Each judgment points toward a mirror. The task is not to condemn ourselves for having these traits, but to recognize them as part of our own inner landscape. Once glimpsed, the shadow must be invited into dialogue. Dreams often carry its voice in grotesque or frightening images. These images should not be dismissed, but listened to as symbols. Art, writing, and solitude can open the way for it to speak. Even in ordinary life, one can notice when a strong emotion arises and ask, what does this say about what I have hidden? This dialogue is not about surrendering control, but about expanding awareness. The more of yourself you can hold consciously, the less you are ruled by unconscious forces. And with this integration comes energy. Many people move through life weary, not because they lack energy, but because so much of their energy is locked away in repression. To reconcile with the shadow is to release that imprisoned vitality. It is as if the blood begins to flow through limbs that were long numb. Life regains color and texture. Relationships grow more authentic, for you no longer need to pretend to be better than you are. Others can sense when you have befriended your shadow because you are less defensive, less judgmental, more grounded. You no longer need to project your darkness outward or to chase your light in others. You carry both within yourself. The path is never finished. The shadow shifts as you grow. What was unconscious yesterday may be integrated today, only for new aspects to emerge tomorrow. Yet the very act of turning toward it transforms your relationship with yourself. No longer an enemy, it becomes a guide, a well of hidden resources. By befriending the shadow, you cease to live as half a person. You step into wholeness, carrying both the light and the dark, and from that wholeness springs vitality, the unmistakable force of a life lived from its depths. Love in its truest form cannot be born out of sacrifice of the self. What often passes for devotion is not love but submission, a quiet betrayal of one's own soul in order to preserve harmony, to secure approval, or to cling to connection. Yet this kind of bond, though it may glitter for a time, corrodes from within. For when one gives away too much of oneself, resentment gathers in silence, and the relationship becomes a prison of unspoken truths. Love that demands self-betrayal is not love, it is dependency, fear disguised as affection. The turning point comes when a person begins to sense that every time they say yes while meaning no, a small fracture opens inside them. Every time they remain silent while truth burns in their chest, a piece of life energy drains away. The psyche does not tolerate betrayal forever. It rebels through symptoms, anxiety, bitterness, fatigue, sudden eruptions of anger. These are not signs that you are failing in love. They are signals that love has become distorted, that the soul is demanding integrity. The act of setting boundaries, then, is not rejection of the other, but reconciliation with oneself. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls, as cold refusals or hard divisions. But in reality, a boundary is like the banks of a river. Without form, water becomes a swamp. With too much rigidity, it dries to a trickle. But with the right channel, it flows with force and direction. So it is with human love. Boundaries give shape to affection, preventing it from dissolving into chaos or suffocation. They say, "Here I am and there you are. I will not consume you, nor will I allow myself to be consumed. Between us there is space, and in that space love can breathe." To establish a boundary is to make a profound statement that your own being has value, that your desires, limits, and truths are worthy of respect. This does not diminish love, it dignifies it. For if I respect my own depths, then when I offer myself to another, I offer something authentic, not a hollow mask. Love without boundaries is an illusion, for it depends on denial. But when two individuals meet with their edges intact, they are able to touch in reality, not fantasy. There is always fear in drawing these lines. One fears abandonment, rejection, anger, and indeed some relationships will falter when boundaries are set, for they were sustained only by the absence of them. Yet what remains and what grows is more enduring. When you no longer betray yourself, the love that survives is not conditional upon your silence or submission. It is a love that sees you as you are, not as the projection of another's need. This is the soil in which intimacy deepens. Many confuse sacrifice with love, but true sacrifice is not the erosion of the self. It is the conscious offering of the self's fullness. A parent who denies every personal need does not teach a child love, but martyrdom. A partner who dissolves into the other does not give devotion, but dependency. Real love requires that you bring yourself whole to the table, not broken into pieces to be pleasing. Boundaries ensure that when you give, it is chosen, not coerced. When you yield, it is an act of strength, not fear. In the long run, relationships marked by clear boundaries cultivate trust. For when you say yes, it carries weight, because the other knows you are capable of saying no. Your words are not automatic, but honest. Your presence is not a performance, but a reality. Such relationships may have fewer moments of superficial ease, but they carry the deeper rhythm of truth, and truth, though it sometimes wounds, is the only foundation on which love can endure. To betray yourself for another is to poison the very ground of connection. To honor yourself, even at the risk of displeasing or losing another, is to open the possibility of genuine encounter. This is the paradox, that love grows not by dissolving boundaries, but by establishing them. When each person guards the sanctity of their own being, they meet not in illusion, but in freedom. In this freedom, love becomes not possession, not need, but recognition. Two individuals stand before one another, neither diminished, neither erased. Each says, I will not betray myself for you, nor demand that you betray yourself for me. I will meet you as I am, and I invite you to meet me as you are. Here, in this space, love ceases to be a fragile arrangement of compromises, and becomes what it was always meant to be, a force that deepens life, a communion without chains. So here is your task for the week. Record your dreams, notice your projections, befriend one shadow trait, and take one step, however small, toward the life that keeps calling. The true self is not far away, it is near, waiting for your consent.